Rightio, folks. I guess we'll about time to sort of kick off. By all means, grab your lunch and bring it on in. So my name's Gunter Ollmann. I'm CTO for security inside the Cloud and AI division. So the Cloud and AI division is recently named. It was Cloud and Enterprise, and with some a lot of sort of changes around internally. So my focus is on cloud, or Azure in particular, and AI, and my focus is how to bring those together to make the whole thing more secure, both as a provider, as public service, as a public cloud provider, and also how do I ensure that Azure itself is the most secure platform that's out there. My talk today is really going to be looking at public cloud as critical infrastructure. And some of a few tips that were sort of learnt also along the ways. It is a little bit geared up towards those of us who I think in terms of critical infrastructure, but I would hope that at least some of these takeaways were also applied to enterprise, large enterprise, and sort of can help you as through your own organizations. So the premise here really is that, depending on where in your world, but in the US, Canada, and most of Europe, access to the internet is now basically classed as a human right, okay? And the internet itself is more typically classed as a public utility, so that it has an awful lot of controls over about how you access to it, who has access to it, and then continuity of service. Frankly, that's great to sort of say that, but today's internet is a very barren place without public clouds. All the core services that are running on that are classed as the internet today are running on public clouds. Okay, and while I use the term public clouds, from my perspective, and what I'll talk about is sort of the lessons learned from Microsoft, in particular on the Azure side. But QED, public clouds is now critical infrastructure. So where do I sort of start this? I think the first tip for really understanding and sort of developing the security side really is get the fundamentals right. And what I mean by that, so the objective of this first tip of getting the fundamentals right is drive accountability and continually raise the bar on security. Okay, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into that, but the requirements for this almost feels like I'm giving a cooking show here. I'm going to here's what we're going to be cooking, and here's the ingredients. But to get the fundamentals right, what I've found are a few things. So first of all, you need to have the leadership commitments and presence. Okay, it's all very well saying that the leadership is behind this initiative, but if they're not there and they're not part of this program sort of going forward, it is wasted effort. Clarity on ownership and dependencies. Okay, who owns what within inside your organization? Okay, and what are those dependencies of those systems? Right, and being very clear about who owns those and what the responsibilities are. Cross-organizational agreements. And what those KPIs are. So what are those key performance indicators that you're going to be measuring on this side? But cross-organization, try to keep these things as simple as possible. And you need to have the measurement tools and the telemetry. So from a Microsoft side, one of the key things, this is my number one tip. We have a program called Get Secure. Okay, it's part of our key fundamentals program. What Get Secure is all about is effectively how to ensure that I have the ability to monitor the security, the key fundamentals of my organization across all business units and measure them, make people accountable for them, and drive progress in increasing the security of these things. So key things that I have here, automated monitoring and evaluation against KPIs. Okay, so first of all, if I look at what sort of things that I care about, when I talk about security fundamentals, some of these things that I care about, from the Microsoft side, we have about 25 different fundamentals that we are measuring on a continual basis. Okay, and some of these things for organizations may be a little bit simpler. So, for example, it may be any internet-facing service, any admin accounts, and that have to be run multi-factor, MFA, so run multi-factor authentication. Okay, nice simple one. So there should never ever be an admin account there, for example. It means that you have to be able to instrument your network and instrument of your environment to ensure that you can actually measure whether or not MFA is actually turned on, isn't available, for example. Okay, and what we do on these is, and sort of driving this security fundamentals program is agree, first of all, what these fundamentals are, what these KPIs are, and how to measure them. Okay, so agree with inside the organization what these things are. So for example, if we're talking about multi-factor authentication. What we're effectively saying is that if we do not have multi-factor authentication on admin accounts, it means that bad guys can guess a password, a brute force a password at administrative level and control a server. And this server would, these types of servers would result in these types of bad things for Microsoft. So there's agreement at the executive level that those are things that Microsoft will not stand for. Okay. So it's already agreed at that level. Okay. Then what we do is that there is a team that are constantly monitoring these and pulling on this telemetry. And what we do is that every on a monthly cycle, we effectively get into a very large auditorium. Okay, and every owner for these types of systems is there, as well as the senior management. Okay, and the owners on there. So we get these together, and we effectively run a review of how we're performing against these particular indicators. So let's say that we've just brought out a new one, and we're talking about the JITs, or just-in-time access to systems. We may say that across the entire organization, we want to have at least this level. We want to say we want 85% of all systems to be running JIT, full stop. Okay, and so for every single business unit, what we're effectively doing is we're measuring all of them and saying your business unit at the moment is about 86%. Great, you're above that sort of level, nice green. Your business unit over there is 83%. Okay, so you're running an orange, and your business unit over there is on 10%, well and truly into the red. Having come to those particular numbers, right, we're then presenting and effectively running through these organization business units instead of effectively saying, well, let's focus on the red ones today. Okay. So, this particular business unit, you're running on red today. Please stand up and explain to the rest of the organization here why you need an exception for not meeting this particular goal. Okay. Now, the purpose of these types of these meetings and that, and the GITS program, is not to name and shame. We've already agreed what the objectives are. We've already agreed what the business impact is. The purpose of this is for those teams and those business leaders to stand up and say, look, I've got a problem. I can't reach this level. Okay. So what do I need to do? Here is my plan, but here are also what commitments I need from other business units to reach this. And then, because we also then have the senior leadership in the same room during that particular meeting, what that also means is that if that plan is not good enough, right, all the decision makers are in one place at the same time to be able to go over that and to arrive at a decision and arrive at a path. Okay. And so at that point in time, we have a check mark, but we also have a plan of action right there and then. Okay. Again, though, so what we're looking at is to drive that continual growth. Now, as we sort of go through these, and we raise the level from 85%, 90%, 95%, 99%, 99.9% through the organization, then we'll add additional KPIs. Okay. And so what I've seen and been sort of working with organizations is to start small. Pick a couple of simple KPIs, like no, MFA is a very good one, right? So no administrative account should not have, MFA on there. It may also be that there should be no administrative ports open to the internet. Nice, simple ones, easy to measure, okay? And just continually drive that through the organization. So that was number one. The other side really is, when I look at the systems from a single organization, there's an awful lot of telemetry that we receive. There's so much data. I'm receiving logs about data encryption, about my malware. I'm receiving information about my logs, my phishing attempts, my enterprise security configurations. An advantage of operating in a very large environment, particularly something like the Azure cloud, is that I receive that telemetry not just from my organization and my business units, but from all organizations all the time. And so what I derive is effectively cloud intelligence. So no longer am I talking about data lakes, I'm talking about data oceans, trillions and trillions of streaming events per second. And frankly, human beings suck in this type of environment, right? Machine intelligence and real-time detection is the only way to sort of go. Which leads me to really, tip number 2. AI is your friend, okay? I don't care what Elon Musk says and some of the other ones saying that AI is going to take over the world and that. We're a long, long way, right? We're a long, long way from there. When I'm looking at this from critical infrastructure perspective, scale must not be limited by access to, the human expertise, or the number or availability of those hands with those expertise. Okay. So what I mean and what I need from that, so I need to be able to gather all that telemetry. Okay, so I need to get all the data, the logs, the alerts, and all the information I can possibly pull in. And so one of my key requirements is how do I focus on bringing that information into one source or as close together so I can analyze them. I need to prioritize streaming over hunting. Okay, I do realize that many of the focus on recent discussions has been about threat hunting. That's fun. You can find some interesting stuff, but it is needle in a haystack, and you're looking for a needle. Then if you go for a big enough haystack, you will find a needle. Frankly, when you're talking about scale, I have haystacks of needles. Okay, there's not a problem with the amount of things that are interesting that I need to deal with. Okay, so I need to prioritize how do I find these things as fast as possible, and how do I move on from finding these things. So AI, at the core. So first of all, when it comes to AIs, don't reinvent the wheel. Okay. Yes, there's a shortage of data scientists, and everyone that was a physicist or a mathematician or a statistician has now added data science to the resume. Great. Everyone's sort of writing their own sort of AI routines. Frankly, don't bother. There's more than capable systems already out there. And frankly, if you're running Azure, you already have access to all these types of core AI platforms that you can build upon. What I'm focused on is anomaly detection and clustering of behaviors. Okay. Again, though, there is no shortage of these things. The real trick comes in how do I actually peel off and label these clusters. Okay, so AI will help me identify these groups of behaviors. I will need humans to figure out whether those behaviors are meaningful and what the significance of the business risk and the actions need to be there. I then have to, having identified these clusters and identified and label what these particular clusters of interesting things are that are going on with my networks and my environments, I then have to use my real humans to generate the best practices for remediation. Okay, and what I'm looking for there is effectively how do I prioritize my automation on these things. Okay, so I found these buckets, I've determined they're interesting, I've determined what the business risk is, and I'm going to focus on how do I actually start dealing with this and peeling these things off. A key thing here, what I found is that instead of trying to focus on the big chunks of here's a 10% or 20% type of problem, and I'm going to throw all my resources and try to solve that 10%, it's much easier, much more practical to solve 10 of the 1% things, right? So peel off the easiest ones, the smallest ones first. And they mount up really, really quickly, okay? Again, because there's no shortage of volume of data, there's no shortage of things that are interesting out there. And when it comes to the larger things, a 5% type of problem, again, break it down, break it down to smaller and smaller bite-sized chunks. Which leads me into an area here. So when I talk about AI, and not inventing it again, here's a couple of things that I find interesting. Is that so? I get it's not actually shown on here, but I get asked an awful lot to review different companies and provide analysis on a new startup or new type of technologies and that. Here's the way I cheat. I use the Microsoft chatbot. There's a free demo chatbot that you can use that you basically point it at a website or point it at a file repository, you put everyone's documents in there, it goes and learns everything in there, and then you just ask it questions, right? And it finds all the right paragraphs, all the right sentences, and all the right things from the actual, all the documents that are put in there. So what I'm saying here is that when you're looking at, having pulled all this telemetry and then being able to understand your network, understanding your environment, understanding your behaviors, and that the AI tools are already there. So for example, you've got a nice big one down here on the bottom left-hand side, is that you can do very advanced AI processes effectively through flowcharts. Right? But like Visio, drag and drop and connect these types of things today. Having created that, you can test all your routines. And if you want to, you can save it as code and give it to your engineers, and they can hardwire it and things like that if you want. So again, you don't need to reinvent this stuff. Or you can move completely into a SaaS model, and so you see on the bottom right-hand side, if I can drag and drop the bigger elements and build a full cloud enterprise scale solution to solve these problems. Tip number 3, automate, automate, automate. Okay. So the objective here is to reduce the risk and increase speed of response and elastically scale. Okay, now elastically scale doesn't just mean I want to keep on growing and growing. It also means that I want to reduce the amount of effort and energy that I put into solving particular problems early on. Okay, So many of these types of things is that instead of me worrying about and I do worry about things are growing very, very fast, but I also want to make sure that I can shift around resources for when things slow down, and I can reprioritize loads and responses. So the requirements. So I want to be able to continually stream of telemetry, logs, and alerts. Okay. It's not that hard. The harder part really is actually figuring out your own networks and how to bring these volumes of data into the right sort of place. Okay. Don't worry too much about what the security and what user security responses are at this particular phase. Okay. I want green teams to provide the glue code. So what that means in my terms is that I'm going to assume everyone here is familiar with red teams and blue teams, right? Attackers and defenders. Effectively, the green teams guys sit in the middle and just make the code sort of work. If I have my attackers, my red team attacking my particular systems, my blue team is sort of looking at that and seeing all these types of things that are sort of going on there, right? And they know what they need to do to respond to this. They have an alert over here, they have an action over here, there's a file that needs to be changed over here, there's the logs over here, I need to pull these little things together and I need to take an action. Great, I've decided on what that sort of thing is. So I pull my green team in there and build that widget, right? Build that, those scripts or whatever that I can automate those particular tasks. And then move on to the next event, okay? And still focus on it. Again, it's this, if you like, it's that 1% problem. Just keep on cycling through those. I want to be able to treat everything as code, all my configuration, right, in particular. All those particular routers, all those particular servers, everything on the configuration side, I need to be able to treat as code and manage as codes. Okay, I don't want any unicorns out there, right? I don't want any being custom scripts that are only for one particular server or one particular environment. And I want to mandate. So I need a mandate to be able to review and improve all the processes. So when it comes to automation, so first of all, AI and automation go hand in hand. Okay, when you're talking about scale and elasticity for your environments and that, you have to think that the two go together. Okay, you can't sort of do out one without the other. And to get the scalability, then of course the AI is that critical ingredient there. It's the key ingredient for actually being able to scale your business and scale your organization beyond the human capabilities. When I talk about treating configuration as code, you need to manage it accordingly. So in particular, the DevOps approach to systems, right? Humans are great for this, but you cannot have the humans being a gatekeeper to a process. And what I mean by that is that the way we sort of operate and what we've learned is that you build you bring on the data, bring on the telemetry, you use AI systems to be able to identify what these behaviors are and what these significant behaviors are, start building the automation around what the responses to these particular things are, and you watch from above there. And so the humans are actually done the classification and the prioritization in advance. And then the humans are then overseers to the system and identifying when it's possible to improve the process and make sure the processes are running correctly. Which means that if to oversee the systems are running correctly is that every time I automate, I need to generate a new type of telemetry, and I need to bring together a new type of watches. So I need to add watches to these watching services. That gives me the ability to monitor and review all of my automation, and to invalidate and to ensure that my automation that I brought through my phase one is actually working and solving the problems that I cared about the most in the first place. Lesson number 4. So I call this one lesson number 4 as opposed to tip number 4 because it's a hard one, right? So supply chain security. So what I mean by here is, the objective is to secure the supply chain and verify integrity at any time. Okay. So the ingredients for this, the requirements, I need the ability to negotiate or renegotiate my contracts with my suppliers. I need instrumentation for the logs, alerts, and telemetry. I think I've said that every single time. Again, that telemetry, I need that visibility of what's going on inside my network, inside my environment. I need the ability to securely update firmware, microcodes, and the certificates on these devices as part of my supply chain. And I need to remove my dependencies on single suppliers. So again, thinking of the sort of scale that we're operating at. So what have we found? Okay, first of all, supply chain security is hard. It's not a solved problem today. There's plenty of, I've got plenty of ideas on how I can make it much, much better, and certain ways I can reduce risk. But today it's an ongoing sort of problem. It's one of the bigger problems that we have to sort of tackle. Large, widely distributed hardware environments. Okay, everyone sort of thinks of like Azure, it's all brand spanking new. We're opening up, new data centers every single week. Billions of investment down there. But don't forget, some of these systems are, some of these data centers are now, 4 years old, ancient in our terms, right? And they have, we're now 4 or 5 generations in technology beyond that, right? So the ability to still support and still cycle out these types of technology is a key part for managing security as we go along there. We still do talk about trust but verify. Frankly, I would replace that by continual monitoring and validation. Okay, so all very well to take a sampling of systems, and trust but then verify and then hope that everything's okay afterwards. Again, that telemetry, the continual visibility, the continual use of artificial intelligence to monitor for behavioral anomalies and the clustering of those anomalies allows me to provide that, to get that continual visibility, and the ability to action any changes on there. From my side, what it also means is that we have to now start treating third-party codes and subjecting it to exactly the same levels of testing and validation as we do for first-party codes. Okay, that's a big change. It's also, frankly, a pain in the ass for many suppliers, right? For them to, now a vendor is telling them that, we need your source code, and we're going to test the hell out of it to the same standards that all of other code is. A lot of failures, but it also means a lot more investment in working with those suppliers and making their code better. And frankly, if I make their code better, then I make my environment better, and frankly, anyone else that uses their hardware and other software as well. Right. Another key thing, and this is something that you'll see more of sort of going forwards, in the industry, and that really is signed code only. Right. Nice thing about us running signed code is that, particularly on like endpoints and things like that, if you run if you can only run signed code, the malware problem goes away, right? Short of your own certificates being stolen, and that fundamentally changed the game. The problem, though, is that by having to go through a process of signed code only means that you need to be much more rigorous in how you manage code, audit code, and then you have to do the signing processes and sign these things yourself. Okay, many things break along that sort of process, but you'll see more and more sort of environments moving towards this going forward. No layer or device of trust should have full access. There's no way that a particular compromise of any particular system, whether through a vulnerability or a backdoor or anything like that, should be able to have access to all layers within particular environments. That's particularly if you saw many of the Intel vulnerabilities at the beginning of this year, those types of vulnerabilities that may lay in the crust of the CPUs and things like that, no way should vulnerabilities at that level be able to expose the rest of the stack to the systems. And AI to monitor the behaviors and anomalies, right? So again, that continual stream. So move away from, I have now put all my data in one big pot and I'm going to start mining these things, and hopefully I can do this on a cold or a warm state. By moving into a continual stream, then I can action these things in real time, ideally real time. So wrapping up a little bit. So making critical infrastructure more secure. 3 key points from my side. So security fundamentals are everyone's responsibility. Okay. Again, you need to get that executive team, the executive support, and everyone within an organization agreeing what those fundamentals are. Start from that small list, be very clear on what the consequences are, and everyone is responsible in understanding, who's actually responsible for it, who's actually, and work as an organization of ownership to solve these particular issues and drive those fundamentals, drive the measurements of those fundamentals, increase your overall security, one step at a time. So streaming data collection lies at the heart of all good AI and automation, okay, and overall risk reduction. Okay, so streaming data wins. Does take effort, to bring in that data and to be able to manage those types of data. The continual refinement and improvement approach. Okay, so again, so tackle the smaller ones and again, bring up that telemetry, completely monitor these things, and as you automate particular processes, as you automate some of the methodologies, build into those systems the ability to track and monitor those, assign KPIs for those, and then improve them as you sort of go along. Okay, so basically, let the AIs do the hard work. The bulk data, bringing those things together. Let the humans label and develop the methodologies, and then having developed those methodologies you agree with, then automate them, and then continually review and update those automation pieces as you sort of go along. So with that, about a few minutes. Any sort of questions? Well, I know I talked really fast, but happy to answer a question. One down the back there.
So, a lot of the stuff you talked about in the public cloud environment is great. A lot of customers that I've been talking to lately have been looking to take some of the stacks and put these accounts. Are you seeing any sort of traction there? I mean, there's obviously going to be additional compute costs you have to deal with because you have to stand up the environments. But from a security perspective, there's obviously a bit of
So have you seen customers moving away from the cloud onto on-premise stacks? Not a lot. So for example, you have Azure from the public cloud side. We also have Azure Stack as the on-premise. I've only really seen organizations adopt Azure Stack as meeting certain regulatory requirements as a stopgap and then transitioning across. Not the other way around today. In fact, a lot of the work is actually going on now educating regulators that the public cloud and Azure is more secure than running on-premise. Right? I have the luxury that I have 3,500 security engineers. Right? I have several hundred red team professional pen testers working on the systems daily. Different type of environment, I think. Question. One in the back there.
I love your advice for security, particularly the AI and analyzing. But the security departments don't generally have some of these skills that are needed to put this stuff together, this automation. How do you make? What are the recommendations you make for the CISO or others in the organization to build this out and make it real?
So I think there's two pieces to it. It's like, it should not be the onus of the IT department to have to solve and figure all this out, right? And to make it pass to the business. Start from those security fundamentals. Agree with the business what those key, 2 or 3 objectives are, and make sure that everyone understands what the significance of those things are. Now, if the business has agreed that, short passwords are bad, and there should be no tolerance of that in the organization, then the IT comes up with a solution of how we're going to monitor this, and here are the substitution technologies for that. That's one part. Bring in the telemetry, the AI pieces today. Frankly, AI today, like I showed you one of the slides today, is like going back to, what would it be, 1995, 1996, when you move from here is this complex system for accountants to here's Excel. Okay, you're now moving into this sort of platform. You can now do all that stuff that used to be very specialized skill, in this particular platform, right? And now that's the stage that we're now at AI, right? With many of these sort of systems here that the IT team can create all these particular systems. But one of the examples I showed on there was actually for the marketing departments to get better at their CRM identification of their customers, and was actually created by the marketing departments to do this sort of things, right? And so I think that's where we're at this inflection point where the AI is less mythical beast, and now Excel spreadsheets almost. Right. Cool. Any last questions? Oh, question up the front here. Sorry. Okay. 2 questions up the front.
Can you mention IETF and the Cloud Security Alliance, how they fit into your work or Microsoft's plan going forward?
So IETF and the Cloud Security Alliance, and how they sort of fit into the plans. Not really. And so I think there are great organizations that are providing advice on how to secure the clouds. That's great. Following those advice, I think many of the lessons learned from Azure and AWS, today there is just a huge gap in the public cloud of the two big providers, and the next one's down. And so the lessons that we're learning today are quite different. And the security technologies are changing at a very, very fast rate at high ends. But the fundamental pieces, I think, go beyond just the Cloud Security Alliance and this. And that's why I sort of picked these particular topics as ones that I think apply to critical infrastructure in general, and just sort of fundamental best practices as we sort of move on. This whole sort of thing of cherry picking things that we're going to go hunting for and responding to these, to now being, this is just part of our business flow, right? And letting the smart systems do the smart stuff, and let the humans add their expertise on top, but not being a bump in the wire. Cool. Question?
Two questions. One is, how much of what you've shown us in your methodology and your roadmap is your personal touch, and how much is Microsoft's way of doing things? Have you changed things?
So I'm a year into Microsoft, so yeah. I would say my touch is very light. Okay. My role, in many ways, is to work across the different business pillars, and try to bring these things together so the communication works in the first place. But also, I joined Microsoft as 30 years of being a bad guy, running consulting companies and doing the bad stuff, and so adding a different sort of flavor on these things. Many of these types of systems have been simmering away. So, for example, the security fundamentals is about a couple of years into its growth, and sort of sharing through there. Supply chain and things that we're now actually trying to do in action on things like code signing and renegotiating contracts with their suppliers so that they are subject to the same tests, stuff that is happening now while I'm there. So a spectrum of different things.
Okay. My second question is, how does what you're doing compare to your two main competitors? If they were giving a presentation, are they thinking along the same lines? I mean, I'm sure you keep tabs on what the other two big guys are doing.
I'm not quite sure the other two, but one.
Well, let's say Google and Amazon. Google
and Amazon. Okay, so I would hope they're doing much the same, yeah. From these sides. Certainly from, so I think Google has probably done some very nice things with their hardware, part of their supply chain. And Microsoft are doing a very similar sort of thing of being able to validate all the code that's actually running on the hardware. But I think the security fundamentals parts is something that's probably more advanced at Microsoft. We started the SDLC 14 years ago, right? And so this is a newer evolution of that particular process.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you all. Cheers. I'll be around if you want to. Hey, pleased to meet you. How's it going?